Life is beautiful, but the beauty, the transformation arises out of how we manage challenge. The transformational leader doesn't only inspire you as a person, he or she is able to inspire you to do things that you never thought was possible. This is what you recognize when you experience a transformational leader. But here's the gap. And this is the gap of my research. So what you see when you experience a transformational leader, but it doesn't talk about what it takes to become one. My research is about what it takes to become one. There are three main pieces that have come out from my research. The three key ingredients for being transformational.
Welcome back to another episode of Humankinder. Over the last few years, many of us have noticed a silent crisis of meaning in our society. Just beneath the surface is a sense of hopelessness, a pervasive sense of sadness, frustration, anxiety. We feel it in our own hearts, and also we see it in the streets around us. And in our organizations, we're getting stats like 1 out of 5 people are engaged in the work that they do. That means 80% of people are spending the majority of their lives doing something that they would rather not do. And before we put this down to just a sign of the times and to personality, there are also individuals everywhere who buck this trend. There are people who are full of love, full of joy, full of passion and purpose, no matter what the external circumstances are. And my guest today is obsessed with studying and understanding and learning and embodying the lessons from these people. He brings 7 years experience as a monk, decades of experience in organizations and in life, and a recent PhD in transformational leadership. And he's convinced that all of us can learn the skills of becoming truly transformational in our own lives, no matter where we are. Jude Martin Etuka, welcome back.
Thank you, Kieran. It's wonderful to be back here talking about these wonderful topics, things of interest coming from the heart.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. And I wonder, as you walk around today and you look at organizations or society, the groups you're involved in, the people you meet, and you look inside your own heart, what is it that you see that maybe a lot of people are not noticing?
That's an interesting question, because I think you and I were having a conversation just before we started this, and I was commenting on my observations, one of them being on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, we see people put pictures up of themselves, what they're recently doing, and everyone's smiling. It's beautiful to see everyone smiling, isn't it? Everyone's smiling. We take on the best pose to make sure that we convey the best impression. Impression, very powerful word, because it's just that, an impression. But beneath the surface, from conversations that I've been having with people in organizations, with leaders, from conversations I've been having at home, with family, from conversations I've been having with, I went to Dubai recently for a conference where I had the opportunity to speak about these things that we're speaking about. And it was my first time going to Dubai, Kian. I've never been to Dubai before. I was very excited to go. Interestingly, when people go to Dubai, and I'm not quite sure we've had this conversation before, what I hear from people is how opulent Dubai is. Opulent. People don't often talk about the other side, the other impression of Dubai. And so when I went to Dubai, one of the things that I did was I spent time, we can talk about Dubai, there's the other side of Dubai, which is absolutely beautiful, but don't get me wrong. But I spent time in Dubai talking with, for example, the baggage handlers that operated at my hotel, who were the warmest of people. Whenever they spoke to you, they put their hands on their heart and they ended every statement with, Inshallah. What they meant by that is, by the grace of God. The hand on their heart. It was just the spirit of that it felt truthful. And so my experience in Dubai, and this relates to the question you've asked me, my experience in Dubai taught me, actually, I spent time with security guards. I spent time talking to the taxi drivers who told me that they worked 7 days, 12-hour shifts, 7 days. They didn't have a break. And people don't talk about that. What they talk about the Burj Khalifa, which is an amazing. I mean, even as I'm talking to you, I'm looking up here because I can see. I stood in front of the Burj Khalifa wondering, saying to myself, how on earth was this built by human beings? You get blown away by that. But there's the other side too of the human beings doing it tough. And so when I look at LinkedIn, let's coming back to LinkedIn, see people smiling in the pictures, but people are doing it tough. That's the impression I have of our current state with inflation, with how hard things, prices are going up, salaries are remaining the same. People who've been out of work for years looking for work, skilled people. People are doing it tough, but we put a smile on our face because we don't often like to talk about what's real and what's raw. And what's real and what's raw, my research and my experience tells me that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be a human being. Interestingly, your podcast is called Humankinder. So it links in with that.
Yeah, it's certainly one of the more challenging times to be alive, to make a living externally. And yet we've heard a lot about the internal shifts that people are making. More people are seeing psychologists.
Yes.
More people are talking about their feelings. More people are becoming more emotionally intelligent. And yet we're still continuing to see so many people struggle. Why is it, do you think, that in this world where we know so much more about our inner world, where we've said to people, it's okay to speak, it's okay to talk, why is it that we're still struggling so much to really just be peaceful, joyful, and happy in our everyday lives?
Well, you mentioned the word emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence is one of the key topics of my research towards my PhD. And emotionally intelligent, the word or the phrase emotionally intelligent, introduced by Daniel Goleman, has been around for a good number of years. And my research shows, because my research is actually at the intersection between emotional intelligence, mindfulness, or what I like to call self-mastery practices. So the intersection between emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and what it means to be transformational leadership. And what surprised me in my research, and I interviewed, 8 leaders of very senior levels of organizations in Australia. I had over 1,000 leaders respond to my survey questions on emotional intelligence, on what it means to be transformational. And what the research showed me, and this is interesting for our viewers who are watching this, and this is also in response to your question, is that being emotionally intelligent is not enough. There's more. And so the first step is to become more emotionally intelligent. That's the journey starts, as it were, with learning about how Jude deals with Jude's emotions. What am I feeling right now? Where am I feeling what I am feeling? And that might sound a little bit wishy-washy for some, but actually emotions aren't just, it's not theory, right? They're real. Emotions are real. And, if you don't think they're real, just take a step back, even for our viewers right now, and actually almost step into the other layer of yourself. And just notice what you're feeling right now. Are you feeling calm? Is there some friction happening somewhere inside? Where is that in the body? Everything lands in the body. The body is the landscape of our emotions. So being emotionally intelligent is a critical starting point for learning about the self. But it's not enough to be emotionally intelligent, because my research shows that actually you can be emotionally intelligent, or the leaders who took my survey, the analysis shows that whilst people believe that they're emotionally intelligent, that doesn't necessarily translate to what it means to be transformational.
Yeah, so take us back then and zoom us out a little bit when we look at this whole area of transformational leadership.
Yeah.
How have you become so interested in this, and could you explain transformational leadership and why it's important? Give us the frame here.
Okay. So the frame is a combination of lived experience and lived experience looked at from the perspective of my own personal experience, but also lived experience from the perspective of having worked for 15 plus years with organizations from the perspective of organizational development, what we call OD, and research in my current PhD. So let's start from, without going into too much detail. For those of you that watched the first podcast will know about, I talked a little bit about my story of personal transformation, which started at a young age of 8, when I was uprooted from stability of Chelsea in London and taken to the bushes, because that's what it was, taken to the bushes of West Africa, where I had to learn to survive by myself at the age of 8, all the way through boarding school and all the challenges that I had to deal with as an 8-year-old. And then leaving boarding school and recognizing that I was facing some internal challenge, questions, thoughts that were asking me, who am I and why am I here? And those challenges then led me to making a decision to live in silence for the best part of 7 years. Meditation and study and manual labor, plenty of manual labor, which we've spoken about. I never really, and it's interesting that even though life is a journey, even though I knew what I was going through at the time, I didn't fully understand. And even now, there's the constant revelation of this. But fast forward 20 to about 20 years, 25 years, when I decided to do a PhD, and my PhD is on the area, happened to be on the area of transformation, I was forced to take a step back to ask myself, when did my own journey of transformation start? And everybody has their own journey of transformation. And I'm going to explain what transformation means, but everyone has their own journey of transformation. We just have to take a step back to ask yourself, when did your journey start? That's my challenge to all of our listeners today. I'm asking them the question, when did your own journey of transformation start? I now know when mine started through the lens of my research. But let me just pause on that question for a moment. Let's talk about the word transformation and transformational leadership. Maybe we start with transformational leadership first. Now, transformational leadership, the concept of transformational leadership, it's been around for donkey's years. 1985, Bernard Bass came up with the word transformational leadership. And when Bernard Bass talks about transformational leadership, he talks about 4 different things. He says, this is what you're going to, whenever you experience somebody that is a transformational leader, these are the 4 things that you're going to recognize. And one of them is what he calls individualized consideration. A transformational leader is able to take a step back from looking at everybody to zero in on you, Kian. You're what's important. Individualized consideration. He or she gives you the space. Yeah? Individualized consideration. There's also intellectualized stimulation. When you are with a transformation, and see, I can see you're smiling here because maybe as I'm speaking, and for those of you that are listening, you may have had experience of working with a transformational leader. You'll never forget a transformation leader when you worked with them. I've had that experience. Intellectual stimulation, they stimulate you intellectually. Clarity around vision. You walk away from that conversation and you go, wow, that was a great conversation. Whenever you're around this person, you're intellectually stimulated. And there are about 2 other dimensions of what it means to be transformational that just popped out of the head right now, so I may not come back to those. But for those of you that are interested in learning about what it means to be transformational, in the theory is there are 4. It's called the 4 I's of transformational leadership. Bernard Bass. This is what you recognize when you experience a transformational leader. But here's the gap. This is the gap of my research. Bernard Bass doesn't say what it takes to become a transformational leader. He said, this is what you see. So what you see, but when you experience it, when you experience what it means to be when you experience a transformational leader, but it doesn't talk about what it takes to become one. My research is about what it takes to become one. And here we now move into what does it mean then? What does transformation mean? Transformation, when used in our present organizational language, appears to be quite glossy. You hear about IT transformation in organizations. Yeah. You talk about financial transformation, And we think, we may have the impression that it's all about the glossy stuff. Well, not so good news is that to be transformational or transformation is the opposite of that. To be transformational requires the ability to cope. To cope with the stresses and the strains of living. The stresses and strains, let's bring it back to organizational language, the stresses and strains of what it means to be a leader. The pains and the pressure of leadership. Because life itself is stressful. And so when I look back at my own lived experience, I was coming back to my own lived experience here of being uprooted to the dimension from stability and moving into uncertainty. Even when I entered into the monastery, I had no idea where I was going in. But there was a sense that this is the path. This is the path. Dealing with the struggles, dealing with uncertainty, walking hand in hand, side by side with uncertainty, which many people are doing. We tend to run away from uncertainty in organizations. We want certainty at all costs because certainty is less painful. Transformation, real transformation, I think about the ugly duckling transforms into the
beautiful swan.
Into the beautiful swan. Yeah. Or what is it that transforms into the butterfly? The caterpillar transforms into the beautiful butterfly. We don't often take a step back and ask ourselves, how much pain did that caterpillar go through in order to transform into the beauty that is now the beautiful butterfly. And so what Bass doesn't talk about is the pain and the pressure and the stress. And in mindfulness literature, we call it the suffering of leadership. That's what my research is about. And just to tie that up, because we began this conversation by talking about what it means to be emotionally intelligent. To be highly emotionally intelligent does not equate, my research shows, to what it means to be transformational. Many of us may be highly emotionally intelligent, but we don't have the capacity, we don't have the capability to take our emotions and use those emotions when suffering arises, when pain arises, to use those emotions to become transformational. We don't have that capacity yet. It's a struggle, if that makes sense.
Hello there. We'll get back to the conversation in just a sec. But first I want to share about something that's very close to my heart right now. I've been working with the Soul Alignment Method and Miles Trainer, who's been a guest on this podcast for the last number of years. And through that work, I've really learned how to uncover my own purpose, the elements of my own unique purpose blueprint, and now to help others do the same. And as part of Soul Alignment Method, the vision is a world where everyone knows who they are, why they are here, and can live it in this lifetime. This allows us to really make decisions that are in our highest alignment around career, around relationships, around lifestyle, location, and around our physical health and all the other areas of our life. I would like to offer to listeners of this podcast a completely free or donation-based initial session for 90 minutes where we go deep and draw out from within the unique elements of your soul's purpose, your purpose blueprint. If there's something that's interesting to you, you can visit my website at www.humankinder.com.au and contact me there, or go to the link tree in the description, which has all the links on my WhatsApp. And I would absolutely love to work with you on this if it feels in alignment. Thank you. And now back to the show. Yeah, I love how you've articulated that, and I can instantly see the relevance to any person, to myself, because we started this conversation by talking about the crisis of meaning, the levels of uncertainty in the world right now, people doing it tough. And it strikes me that every single person is the leader of their own life. We're the leader of our own inner world, and we're leaders in many capacities, whether that's in our relationships, in our friend groups, in our communities, in our families. We could have a formal title as an organization. But ultimately, it strikes me that this clear understanding of what it takes to transform is a key capability for every person to understand. And so I want to dive into what exactly your research has found as the key components to becoming more transformational that we can all learn.
Yeah. And I think the answer to that question is that simple word, isn't it? Self. In our last conversation, we spoke about Daniel Goleman's definition of emotional intelligence. And we were speaking about this prior, which is one cannot really lead others unless one first of all learns to lead self. Self. The ingredient to becoming transformational is learning to step into our own inner landscape, our inner world. And the inner world is more than just emotion. It is emotion, yes. It is thoughts, yes. It's also our spiritual selves. And spiritual self is language that is not quite accepted in many organizations, because when we use the word spiritual, we think of religion. But actually, by our spiritual selves, I'm referring more to the deeper aspects of who we are. You know, we are more spiritual than physical. Even science will show you that, even at an atomic level. I think it's, what's his name, Teilhard de Chardin, who is a 17th century philosopher, talks about, he says, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. So the inner landscape, the landscape of the soul, what is it that makes Jude unique? my unique. And the answer to that question is what it means to be human, what it means to be a human being. And we were talking about this before, my being. So the inner landscape, being able to, Goleman uses the word self-regulate. And so let's use that word. How do I not only self-regulate, as in self-regulate how I show up, self-regulate how I feel, self-regulate how I respond to uncertainty, how I respond to pain and pressure, as opposed to react to pain and pressure. They're two different responses. But how I do that intentionally. To do that intentionally is all about practice, self-mastery practices, knowing my triggers at that level, and actually taking a deliberate step and deciding to take a deliberate step to become more intentional, particularly during times of uncertainty, which is characteristic of our organizations, particularly during times of stress, of emotional turbulence. So these are, in other words, what I'm saying is that in our present time and day and age, characterized by inflation, characterized by limited resources, characterized by, organizational change, these external things create uncertainty, they create pain. And for our leaders during this period, how do we handle that? We don't necessarily handle that externally. It starts from here. How do I manage and expand my inner capacity to remain emotionally steady during times of turbulence? How do I do that?
And so the first aspect then of becoming transformational, what I'm hearing you say is it's about recognizing that the battleground, if you want to call it, or the place of work is truly internal, first of all, and recognizing that you are responsible completely for your own state and setting intentions around mastering self. So going inwards is the first aspect of someone who's truly transformational. What else have the research shown about the key ways of getting to that transformational place?
And it's not just research, it's also lived experience, because at the end of the day, we can only talk about these things from research, yes, but we can but even research is lived experience. I learned, for example, when I made that decision to do something, when I made that decision to become more deliberate about my own life, when I made that decision to be more intentional about my own life, when I decided to go in and spend those 7 years, what I call them 7 years of developing self-mastery practices, I learned one of my main lessons during that period was actually not to run away from what's uncomfortable, but rather run towards the uncomfortable. I spoke about the last time about being assigned portions of grass that I had to cut, and cutting grass with a cutlass onto my hands blistered. Now, I'm not saying that people should do that. But what I'm saying is that symbolically what that represents, and this is what we are saying to people, is don't run away from what's challenging. Whatever is challenging, whatever might be painful, whether that's, maybe your job at work may be under threat. Maybe, and I was speaking to someone during this Christmas period who, a very senior leader, a very senior leader in an organization who lost his job and had difficulty looking for another job. And he had, 2 young kids at home. And he talked about the pressure of that. In fact, the pressure followed him even into interviews when he sat in front of a panel at interview and he was asked a question, for example, he could hear the voices going around in his head saying, "You got to get this job. Make sure you answer this question right. You can't afford not to answer it right." Do you know? And being able to be aware that that's going on, but at the same time, breathing through it. John Kabat-Zinn says, wrap your arms of compassion around your pain. And it's only when you do that that you realize that a new texture of calm emerges. And all of a sudden, you can hear the voices in your head, and you can step back from those voices. And we'll talk about thoughts, because this is a really important part about thoughts. You can step back from your thoughts and recognize that your thoughts are not who you are. But you only get to that point by intentionally and deliberately being intentional about self-regulation. And perhaps we're going to get to that point where we'll speak about this, because this is a really important piece of self. It was a piece that one of my main learnings for when I spent 7 years doing what I did. I recognized that actually, the thoughts that Jude emitted regularly are not Jude. I am not my thoughts. And perhaps let's just say that again. You are not your thoughts. And that might be difficult to comprehend for some, and that's okay. That's where we are. Well, the first thing to recognize during this period of emotional turbulence, mental challenge, is that you are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. They are just the wind in the sky passing through you. That comes from a literature piece in mindfulness, that they're just passing through you, but you are the space that allows them to happen.
Yeah, beautifully put. And so I'm on the journey now of becoming more transformational, and I've woken up to the emotionally intelligent side of myself. Right, I've gone inside and I've started observing emotions, started becoming aware of naming them, labeling them, which is a key part. I've set some intentions now to really start to master my inner world. What does this next step of observing thoughts and realizing that I'm not thoughts, what does that do for a person on their journey of becoming transformational?
Well, first and foremost, it makes you less reactive to what happens. Because what happens. You've got no control over it. I have no control over certain things. And more often than not, anxiety is defined as being in a place that you don't want to be in and fighting that. You got no control over it. So there's something about recognizing and accepting this is where I am. And all the thoughts that arise from the anxious mind, the word that we use is the thoughts that play in the background. Don't fight them, let them play. You can actually hear the thoughts. And those of you that are listening, you can do this right now. Thoughts are always going on. They're always going on. But you can hear the thoughts and not necessarily listen to them. And the more that you learn to hear them, but not listen to them, you begin to find that the thoughts begin to dissipate. And then you step into the space of silence. It's interesting because when I was coming up here, I was just reading a few bits, and Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk, he does pass. You know Thich Nhat Hanh, yes. He passed, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago. An amazing man. He died at the age of 90, in his late 90s. And he was asked to give a talk at United Nations. So he went to the United Nations. And as he sat down with all the leaders of the United Nations, he something that's quite unusual. He said, put up your right hand. So everyone put up their right hand. And he said, this hand is your right hand. Put up your left hand. So this hand is your left hand. Now, some of you may be right-handed, so you use your right hand to write. You don't really use your left hand. It doesn't make the left hand less irrelevant than your right hand. But what it means that both your left and your right hand are part of your body. Makes you human. And then he kept quiet. And they were waiting for him to say more stuff, but he didn't have much. He didn't have anything else to say. He facilitated them to move into this space of silence. And they don't do that at United Nations. We don't do that in organizations. It's all about strategy, more thinking. And actually, the more Thich Nhat Hanh, this is the lesson that he left with United Nations, and this is countercultural to how we do organizations at the moment. But Thich Nhat Hanh's experience in United Nations was saying to them, step back if you can, and you can if you choose, step back into this space of silence, this space of non-thought. Be intentional about stepping back into this space of non-thought. And then when you're ready, come back to thought and notice the difference. That's what he facilitated at United Nations. Non-thought is not the same thing as unintelligence. Actually, my research shows that stepping back in, my research shows, and my lived experience shows that stepping back into the space of non-thought, and by non-thought, all I'm simply referring to is you're not hearing anymore the thoughts playing in the back of your head, but you're stepping back into the space of listening, that we can actually stop thinking if we choose for a period of time, 30 seconds, 1 minute, and then step back into thought and notice that actually you can do strategy better. Something else emanates when we learn to do that. So, and when we learn to be able to do that amidst the chaos of the mind, amidst the discomfort that arises from the chaos, we are stepping more into what it means to become transformational in how we do strategy. As countercultural as it sounds, you go into any organization and you say to your CEO, just before we do strategy, can we just step into a space of silence? They're going to look at you and say, where's the ROI, Jude? In silence. Show me the ROI. What we are suggesting here is based on lived experience and based on research. We've been doing the way that we do strategy in organizations for so long. People have been thinking the way they've been thinking about how organizations should show up during these times for donkey's years. People are still suffering from emotional turbulence in organizations. Not the incapacity to deal with emotional change, with organizational change. Well, perhaps it's time to try something different. Perhaps it's time to step into a new way of transformation, a new way of of what it means to be a transformational leader, which is what we're talking about today.
Hello there. Just a quick one from me. If you're enjoying this conversation, the biggest thing that you can do to support the show is to hit the follow button if you're on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, and please do rate 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and give us a like. All of these things are completely free. They really support our growth, and they also make sure that you get notified of any new content that comes out, so you don't miss a thing. Also, if you're interested, you can follow Humankinder on Instagram at human_kinder, where I'm posting many different clips across different episodes and sharing content along the journey. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your listening. And now back to the show. Wow. And so the picture you're painting then is of a leader or a person who, on an average day, is waking up, they're going to work, and they're setting the attention to remain absolutely present with what arises. So they're being really present with the emotions that come in to their field. They are wrapping their arms around those emotions. They're sitting in the pain, the discomfort perhaps of those emotions, of the difficult challenges, the external circumstances, rather than running from them. And they're just allowing them to be there. Then they're looking at their thoughts. They're observing their thoughts and noticing that those thoughts, if they're coming from this place of negative emotion, are not useful perhaps. And they're sort of picking and choosing what thoughts are really important. Then in addition to this, they have the capacity to actually step back and go beyond thought altogether, go beyond emotion altogether, and enter a space of, we could call it a space of no mind or a space of awareness. And what you're suggesting is that from that space of awareness comes a much more organized and coherent solution, a much more organized and coherent way of tackling problems. That's not emotionally driven, or we could even say is not ego driven to the same degree, because it's less about me and what's really going on for me and my struggles and what's happening, and more about the big picture.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about ROI, you're talking about unlocking a sort of contextual intelligence that we currently don't have access to in our organizations. Would that be, are they the key components you found of getting to transformational leadership? So the intention for self-mastery, and then the emotional intelligence, the ability to sit in pain and suffering, the ability to be mindful and aware, and to transcend the mind, emotions, and pain. Would you say they're the key components, or is there anything else you would add to that?
So I think to be transformational, and I like the picture that you painted of what it actually means for the ordinary person like me and like you, getting up in the morning and going to work, getting up in the morning and spending time with oneself first and setting intentions and actually walking through with those intentions as you get on the train to work, and as you're in the workplace, you're aware of how you're emoting, aware of all the thoughts going on, and actually stepping back to see and to feel where you're being led and which way to go. There are three main pieces that have come out from my research that we can offer to our viewers and to our listeners. And we're not just offering it to them, Kim, because we do it ourselves. I do it myself every day. And hey, there's no perfectionism here. If you quote unquote fail, because there's no such thing as failure anyway, failure doesn't exist, it's just an experience, then you get up and you keep on going. So the three key ingredients for being transformational, I call them the 3 Ps, even though I don't like to call them the 3 Ps, because it's the 3 Ps is a little bit tacky. But first thing is to pay attention to self and other emotion regulation. And what I mean by that is pay attention to how I, Jude, or how you self-regulate. Yeah, paying attention to how I self-regulate. So in other words, Daniel Goleman calls it self-regulation. Self-regulation is really stepping back to understand how I'm feeling emotionally, and understanding actually that the emotional self is not separate from your mental self, really. It's a continuum. Your mental self, your emotional self, your spiritual self, your psychic self, they're all interconnected. So self-regulating the thoughts that are coming in my mind at any given moment. This happens moment to moment. So this requires, and that's why I use the word intentional. It's intentional practice. Think about it. There are millions of thoughts passing through your mind at any given time. The way that I'm feeling right now at this moment is going to be different from how I'm feeling the next moment. Even as I'm sat here, as you are asking these questions, I can feel the answer. I can feel something. What are you going to say now? What are you going to say now? Being aware of those thoughts and knowing that they're those thoughts. Self-regulation. The more that I am better able to self-regulate, the better I am at co-regulating. In other words, the more I learn to lead myself, then you become better at leading others. That's the first ingredient of transformation. And that in itself is a self-mastery practice, continuous. That's the first thing. The second thing is what I call paying attention to pause. In other words, learning to stop mid-flow. Like even right now. You can pause right now. I often say to people, when someone asks you a question, why do you feel you need to respond verbally immediately? I ask you a question, before you respond, before you say anything, pause. Take a breath. Actually, when you take a breath, pay attention to the inhale of that breath as best as you can. There's no perfectionism. What you find is that when you pay attention to your breathing, to your inhale, you cannot inhale and think at the same time. And I challenge my viewers to try that. Really pay attention to breathe to the inhale, as we're doing now. I can see you're doing it too. And notice you cannot pay attention to your inhale or your exhale and be thinking at the same time. That's pause. So when someone asks you a question, whether it's in your organization or whether you're out, and I do this sometimes, and people say, Jude, aren't you going to say anything? Actually, I am. If you're patient, it's coming. So we learn to stop before we respond. Computers. I always like to use the analogy of computer. When you have your computer on for 24 hours, what happens?
It needs a reset.
It needs a reset. It gets a bit foggy. It slows down. So what do?
You give it a restart.
You turn it off. You turn that thing off. And then when you put it back on, what happens?
Yeah, it's flying again.
It's flying. Like literally, what you press the button on and you saw that circle that's going round and round and round, it's gone. We human beings invented the computer, but yet we forget that we are the bigger machines. Turn off. And now you can turn off in the morning. When you wake up in the morning, when the voices come into your head, you can decide to close your eyes and spend 5 minutes or 2 minutes, just not necessarily. And I'm really clear about this. You know, when we use the word mindfulness, people think mindfulness is about when you sit and you meditate. That's one aspect of mindfulness. It's not the whole thing. Mindfulness is actually learning, Jude learning, you learning to take pause with you as you go about doing your doing. Now, when you meditate, that may help you to perfect that self-mastery practice. But you don't need to be a mindful, you don't need to be a monk, you don't need to be a monastic to learn to stop and just pay attention to your breathing. And, you know, even the breath is one of the most disregarded things ever. We never remind ourselves that we're breathing, do we? We only recognize that we're not breathing when someone goes to you, Kian, can I just tell you something? You're not going to be able to breathe for the next 5 minutes. Just be okay with that for a moment. Then panic sets in, right? You realize that actually breathing is so important. The breath is the opportunity. If we focus on it, it takes you into pause. In other words, learn to pause in the midst of doing strategy, in the midst of running your meetings. Do you know, I tell this story here, And this person wouldn't mind me telling the story. And this was so powerful when I was doing my research. I was interviewing this leader. And this leader said to me, Jude, when I'm faced with a very challenging meeting that is about to happen, she's a senior leader, or when I have to stand up to speak, to give a presentation, she says, do you know what I do? And I asked her the question, what do you do? And she said to me, I go into the toilet in her organization. She says she goes into the toilet, closes the door, sits on the loo, and just spends 5 minutes breathing. Spends 5 minutes in pause. As she was saying this to me during the interview, I was just like, it just blew me away. But this is what it takes. This is intention. After she's done the 5 minutes of breathing in and breathing out, not thinking about her thoughts, allowing the thoughts to be there, she's hearing them, but she's not listening to them. Then she goes out and she says she finds herself in a completely different space when she's ready to either give a presentation or to run this meeting that she suspects is going to be highly charged. A new approach to it. Paying attention to pause. That's the second aspect of what it means to become transformational. The third and final one is paying attention to pain and suffering. Paying attention to pain and suffering. And, as you and I are sat here, we've had conversations. We know the challenges that we face, yes? Personal challenges. None of our viewers, there's not one single viewer who is watching this today, and I challenge anyone listening. Everyone has something that they're dealing with. Something, whatever that is, that is emotionally challenging, mentally challenging, that shows up in family, in the organization. It could be imposter syndrome. You could be a senior leader. You could be a middle manager. You could be a junior manager. And you just don't think that you're good enough. That causes you a lot of emotional turmoil. Or it might not even be that. It might be something else. Everyone has a thorn in their flesh, a thorn in their side that they're dealing with. Call it a stone in your shoe. Imagine walking around with a stone in your shoe. Everyone has a stone in their shoe. Now, the key to managing that stone in your shoe is not to disregard it. Ironically, the more you try and fight it, the more painful it is. The key to managing the stone in your shoe or the thorn in your flesh is to pay it some attention. Recognize that the pain is there, but do something more about it. Wrap your arm of compassion around your pain, and let's learn to walk with that pain side by side. Because life is stressful. No one ever said life was going to be easy. And if you think that life is easy, well, there's an opportunity for you to think again. And actually, let me bring some theology into this too. Because even theologically, I remember there's this quote that goes, "By the sweat of your brow shalt thou eat bread." The sweat of your brow shalt thou eat bread. Life is challenging. But the irony about this, and this is not to paint a terrible, life is beautiful. But the challenge here, the picture to paint here, is that it's through the challenge of life that the beauty of life is revealed. That's like we talk about the caterpillar moving into the butterfly, the ugly duckling, changing into the
swan.
into the swan, into the swan. Life is beautiful, but the beauty, the transformation arises out of how we manage challenge. Can't run away from the challenge. It's here with us. The mindset that we have towards it, the self-regulation practices that we adopt in order to transform through challenges is what's key. So those are the three areas. Attention to self-regulation, to self and other regulation, paying attention to pause, and paying attention to pain and suffering. These, as it were, are the 3 steps towards becoming transformational. Noting as well, though, that you're never fully transformed, are you? It's a constant process of what we call self-actualizing.
Yeah, that's really clear. And I think they're things that anyone can use in any situation. I would love to hear from you. What can people expect when they start to pay attention to these 3 areas? Like, take me inside your experience.
Yes. Whenever I used to, many years ago, and I still do it now, but many years ago, when I started the practice of what Kabat-Zinn calls paying attention, in the monastery, I would, for example, sit in meditation. Now, I'm not saying that people should do this, but I'm just giving an example. I used to sit for many hours in meditation. And now the practice of sitting, sitting, itself is physically painful. You can get yourself in as comfortable a position as you can, as we normally say when we start a meditation practice. We say, get yourself into a comfortable position, feet on the floor. Notice your 2 feet on the floor, the small of your back against the back of the small of your back against the back of the chair. Notice how your head is tilted or not. Getting yourself into a comfortable position. Now, stay in that position in stillness for the next 3 hours. No matter how comfortable you were at the start, your leg gets numb. The voices in your head get louder at some point. You want to scratch your ear or scratch here. In fact, you just want to get up and stop. Yeah? However, with perseverance, that's a really important word, perseverance. I like the word perseverance more than resilience, because resilience gives the impression that you bounce back from pain. You never really bounce back from pain. You learn to walk with your pain, persevere through it. The output of it. So whenever I spent time doing meditations for that period, and whenever I rose out of the meditation, there was a tremendous sense of peace, a tremendous sense of calm that, ironically, you may not have felt it so much during the meditation, as it were, even though at some point you go in and out of it, but post the meditation. Now, I'm using meditation as a lived experience here. I'm not suggesting that everyone should meditate, because some people don't. That's okay. I guess the point is, the more you engage in some sort of self-mastery practice, whatever that is, whether that's actually paying attention to your breathing, which you don't have to be religious. You pay attention to your breathing for 10 minutes. And you can really do that. That's what the monks do. You just pay attention to the in-breath and the out-breath. You do that for 10 minutes and persevere with doing that. Notice what happens when you come out of that state. Tremendous calm. A tremendous sense of self-assurance. An inexplicable sense of joy. Now, joy, Joy, is different from happiness. Happiness is an emotion, like anger. It comes and it goes. Yeah? People say, I want to be happy. People say, Jude, do you want to be happy? I say, well, I'm not looking for happiness. What I would like to be rather is joyful. Difference between joy and happiness is that happiness is transient. Joy is a state that develops the more we engage in some form of self-mastery practice. And my challenge to everyone here is self-mastery is not a religious thing. Self-mastery is what it means to be human. It's cultivating the fullness of your humanity. Because when we learn to cultivate the fullness of our humanity, guess what happens in terms of performance in organizations? You're performing at a different level. Self-mastery. It's like sharpening a knife. I'm thinking of the butcher. The butcher has, they've got the knife in one hand and they've got, what do they call the other thing?
It's a whetstone, isn't it?
It's a whetstone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it means to be human. Self-mastery is that, sharpening. And why wouldn't we sharpen what it means to be human? Why wouldn't we sharpen what it means to be a human being? And sharpening what it means to be a human being is all aspects of that. Not just the cognitive aspect, not just our thinking aspect, but the emotional aspect, the spiritual aspect too.
Yeah, the picture you're painting here is of what we would traditionally have thought of as advanced meditators, of people who are becoming more enlightened. That's starting to trickle down into just the everyday experience of everyone, becoming democratized for every human being on the planet, no matter where they work or what organization, to understand these skills, these tactics, these practices, and to use them. And what I'm sensing from what you're saying is that when you do these things, the prize is that you start to become the master of your own state. Like, you happen the way you want to happen. So no matter how difficult the meeting is, no matter how hard the conversation is, no matter how, if you hit your results or don't hit your results, you remain joyful, peaceful, loving, and able to communicate and enjoy your life, not dependent on external circumstances. And would that be a fair approximation of what it means to become more transformational?
Yes, but even more. And more so for the organization. An organization is nothing more than a summation of its people. Take the people out, there's no organization.
So if I was able to create that powerful inner state within myself, why would I want to go and work in these organizations?
Because all human beings are intricately social. We all have, quote unquote, a calling in organizations, beyond organizations, to actually be with others. Being with is a word, a phrase, and I think we spoke about this in the last podcast. Being with is a phrase that Heidegger, the German existentialist philosopher, spoke about, and as did Jean-Paul Sartre, who followed that, which says actually you can't go to the beach as hard as you may pick up a grain of sand. You can't. When you try and pick up one grain of sand, inevitably you pick up a number of them. We can't separate ourselves from others. It's impossible. And so the output of this, of fashioning who we are as human beings, dealing with self first, is that actually we inevitably we're doing it with others. Inevitably, the fruits of my own self-mastery practices, they overflow onto others that are around me, family, friends, people I sit with in organizations, the people that the person that sits next to my desk, it just overflows and it becomes contagious. Importantly, the more I self-regulate, the more I get myself involved in self-mastery practices. And by self-mastery practice, big word, simple things, learning to take a breath, spending time with myself as I take that breath and really doing that with intention. The output of that is a different kind of intelligence. There's a new intelligence. It's not a new intelligence, actually. It's been there all along. But there's an intelligence that emerges out of the silence of pause, for example, out of the silence of paying attention to my pain and suffering, whatever that is, out of that emerges out of paying attention to self and others. There's something that emerges out of that in terms of a higher, in transformational leadership literature, we call it higher order goals. We're able, and this is the beauty of the transformational leader. The transformational leader doesn't only inspire you as a person. He or she is able to inspire you to do things that you never thought was possible. That's how Bass defines it. The ability to achieve higher order goals of a higher realm, if I should use that. What is that? Goals of a higher realm? Things that we didn't think we could do. And so the challenge to organizational leaders, the challenge to us, to you and I, and to anyone listening, is engage in sharpening what it means to you to be a human being and notice the difference that makes in terms of your ability to think beyond cognitive, the ability to be able to see the intelligence that comes out of non-thought, that comes out of silence. Interesting, you probably know this, interesting, the word silent, when spelled backwards, means listen. Do you know that? Silent, listen.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
How do you spell it backwards?
Silent, S-I-L-E-N-T, and actually the same words in silent also spell listen.
So you can rearrange all the letters to turn into listen.
And so when we say be silent, all we're saying is listen. Listen to, just listen. And even across the silence, it's interesting because even silence pervades everything that we do. The only, people that are hearing this conversation as we speak, they're only able to hear it because there's a background within which this is happening. That's a background of silence. We were born out of silence. You think about it. We were born from silence. And actually what happens after we die? We return back to silence. Silence is like breathing. When you listen to the breath, what are you listening to? Nothing. And actually, nothing means no thing. No thing. It's not nothing. It's not a thing that you're listening to. It's not a thingness. It's a no thingness. It's a nothingness, which is actually everything, really. So what this is one of the deep monastic teachings, that actually there's, we are always pervaded by this space. So dropping into that space as much as we can is actually more nourishing than we realize it is.
Yeah, I think that this actually holds the key to the crisis of meaning at the start of this conversation. Because what people will reliably share back after a deep meditation or after any sort of spiritual practice is that just presence itself is imbued with intense meaning, intense beauty and love, like a real sense that this moment right here now is just bursting with life. And when we live from the ego fueling the mind, we're stripped of that intensity of meaning. And so we're just continuously doing task after task after task, and we're not actually fully engaged. We're not getting the juice from life.
Mm.
And so I feel like many people, and I think my first instinct with this whole space was, if I want to experience more purpose, I must rearrange my life in order to get more meaning. The reason I'm not getting any meaning from my work is because the organization is bad, or the work is boring, or whatever it is. And so those external changes may happen, but they're precipitated by an internal change.
Mm.
And what I have noticed is that a much better tactic is to transform who you are and then watch the life around you transform as a result.
Yeah.
And actually, if you start doing the work, start letting go of your attachments, start working on your own trauma, the triggers that other people in your workplace give you, if you do all of that work, you start becoming more mindful, and then you still want to leave, then leave. But don't leave before you've at least started that journey, because you don't really know if you're going to love where you are until you start removing all of this debris that sits between us and that space of utter presence. And that us who we think we are versus that presence that we really are.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear your perspective on that coming home to who we really are. And you mentioned it earlier when you talked about self and the question of who am I? What is it about expanding our sense of self, about sitting in meditation or just practicing resting as awareness, watching thoughts? What is it about that transformation that really enhances life? What is it actually doing for us? Why should I listen to this podcast and go, you know what, I'm going to actually sit and I'm going to try that?
Yeah. It's the counter cultural nature of it that turns many people off. We are afraid of what we don't know. We are quickly turned off by what society says is a waste of time. Sitting with awareness or sitting in awareness. And I think it's really important that we are really crystal clear with our listeners that, we're not expecting our listeners to become the next monastics of our time. If you do, that's great. But actually sitting here and listening to the sounds around you. This is one of the things I learned when I put myself through some practices a while ago. Just being aware of the sounds of the birds, the sounds of the cars as they drive past the window of your apartment. Just paying attention to those, not thinking about them, just listening to them. As you're listening to the sounds of the car passing your window, the siren of the ambulance, the singing of the birds, your feet, feeling your feet on the ground, being aware of perhaps the pangs of hunger that you feel in your stomach at the same time, or your desire to have a drink at the same time. Feeling the clothes that you're wearing, if you're wearing a shirt, feeling the shirt against your back at the same time. These are all things, sensations happening to you at the same time. Just really paying attention to that with curiosity. Not meditating, you're just paying attention. You're sitting in awareness of these sensations. Sitting in awareness of your sensation, of the sensation of breathing in and breathing out, and the relaxation that comes from that activity. Just being curious about it. I often talk about your big toe. I mention that when I talk about mindfulness practices. And I remember someone once said to me, Jude, have you ever felt your big toe? And I thought, what? Feel my big toe? Well, what's the point of that? Until I did that with intention and I felt my big toe. And then you realize that it's not about your big toe, really. It's never been about your big toe. It's about entering into the deeper aspect of who you are as a human being. That's what it's about. Sitting in awareness is about entering into who you are as a human being. There is more to you than the pangs of hunger that you feel. There's more to you than the sound of the siren that you hear. You can hear it and choose not to make meaning out of the sound. You can hear your thoughts and choose not to make meaning of your thoughts. But just allow the space to sense. What was it? I think it's Fritz Perls says something like, step out of your mind and return to your senses. Yeah, Fritz Perls says that. Step out of your mind and return to your senses. In being curious about your senses, about your sensation, is the truth of what it means to be human. Your humanity expands. The reality of who you are, of your potential. Potentiare in Latin. Potentia in Latin. The reality of your potentia emerges. Right? Now bring that with you to the workplace. Engage in those type of self-mastery practices. The more you do that, the more we begin to realize that actually, even though they say human beings fundamentally at the base level are meaning makers, we're always making meaning. And more often than not, the meaning that we're making about something actually is not the case. The more that we can step out of meaning making and more step into that space of just being aware, something different emerges out of that in terms of the potential. Something different.
Just feeling into the experience of someone now who's if I took 2 minutes on a call, to close my eyes and go inward, if I was to do any of these practices, how is that going to help me hit my targets? What would my boss say to this? How is it actually going to help me to improve my lot? And the curious thing about this whole space is that, why is the mind so active? Why are the emotions so powerful? Why is all of this so strong? And what appears to me is that our emotions and thoughts are ultimately the servant of our ego, our identity. And so their continuous job is to try and make sure that everything happens the way I need it to happen. It has to happen this way.
Yeah.
We have to hit these numbers.
Yeah.
This call has to go a certain way. And the risk that I hear in what you're saying is that if I drop into this space of awareness and I allow a little bit more, then things are going to happen that my ego does not like. And things are going to go a way that maybe is not good for my personal identity. And so how do you deal with understand if your transformation is coming like ego-driven transformation, or if it's truly coming from a place of purpose-driven transformation, and you're truly progressing, and you're not just finding better and better ways to satisfy your ego. And then do you say to people, allow those things to happen, let go of some of those, let go of those targets. If they come, if they come, they come. If they don't, they don't. What's the actual practicalities of living in a corporate environment where you must hit these numbers and we are all measured and KPI'd and we've got busy lives, busy families, and they're all attached to what's going to happen? How do you, in that whole world of chaos, stand in a space where lots of people are going to get upset all the time? Things are going to happen that maybe in the past I thought was bad for me. My career, I might get fired. All these things might happen. How do you hold the transformational space in that environment? How do you walk the path of the householder? using these practices?
You see, I think that's a very good question. I think it's not about what you do as such. It's really about how you do what you do. It's also about recognizing that the journey of transforming is not a straightforward journey. It's not conditioned. It's not what we might want it to be. It's often what we don't expect it to be. That's why. That's where. More often than not, the pain of transformation is not. It's not so much painful because it is painful, as it were. It's painful because of what we think about it. People run away from what they think to be painful. But actually, when you step into pain, it's not as painful as what you think it is to be. The idea of the pain that's scary. The more we learn to not think too much about the pain, the more we realize it's not that painful. So what I was saying is that it's not so much what we do, it's how we do what we do, it's how we think about the pain. So I think the response to that question, really the question that you've asked, is really a combination of one or two things. First thing is, it's not so much what you do, it's how you do what you do. We all have KPIs to meet. We all have targets in organizations. They're important. Targets and KPIs are important because that's what moves an organization forward. Right. So we do what we need to do to meet those KPIs. How we do that is what's important. So, for example, do not become the proverbial mouse on the wheel, thinking that if you run that bit faster, you just might catch your tail. It's not about high performance, is not about high task management. Often that's how we define high performance. We define it as high task management. Performance is not high task management. Performance is how you do that. Proverbial mouse on a wheel thinks that by running that bit faster, he or she, the mouse, might catch his tail, and actually just as he's about to catch his tail, what happens? Boom, it collapses. It's completely burnt out. Yeah. The targets are there. On the other hand, however, I recognize I'm going to do everything I'm going to work as hard as as hard as I can to meet my KPIs. But I'm going to do that from a space of calm. I'm going to do that by learning when I feel my heart like this, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to drop into that sensation to understand what is that sensation saying to me. Taking a step back, pausing to feel. I might just be guided differently in terms of how to approach that KPI. Maybe doing that KPI is not so much a matter of doing. It might be a matter more of being present with others. Perhaps being a bit more present with my CEO and having a conversation about X or about Y that might actually say, actually, this KPI is not what it seems. Maybe it's a different way of arriving at that. In other words, what I'm saying is taking a step back, self-regulating through a KPI, pausing through a KPI, and actually recognizing the painfulness of that KPI and operating from that space in terms of how to reach it and how to manage it. Now, of course, you use the word identification. More often than not, we tend to identify with a KPI. The KPI is there, and I'm Jude here. All of a sudden, I identify with that KPI. I become the KPI. That's a problem. because I'm a lot more than a KPI. The KPI has just been something that has come up from a conversation about this is what the organization could look like if we hit this KPI. Whereas actually coming from a space of transformation, we're looking at that same KPI, but we're looking at it from a 360 degrees angle. And we recognize actually there's something more here that we missed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It means that if you earn the prize of realizing that you are the awareness, that what you really are as a human is the awareness that's aware of thoughts, that's aware of emotions, you then get the insight that no matter what thought or emotion arises, that it doesn't actually implicate or destroy the awareness in any way, shape, or form. And the same then can be said for any KPI, any job, any position, any life experience really, no matter what, will continue to come and go. And when it comes and goes, you start to realize that I'm actually okay, because what I am is not my thoughts, as you beautifully put. And what I am is not the person who gets this KPI or not. So therefore, my self-worth is not conditional on a KPI or having this job. And so the beauty in recognizing you're the awareness is that it frees you, or rather it puts it in context beautifully. So what you described is, if I can hold that perspective, well then, if we hit this KPI or not, or if this customer says yes or not, or if my manager says yes or not, might be emotionally stingy, but it doesn't obliterate who I am. And so I'm not constantly at the mercy of external events. And it's like, it's a good day today and it's a bad day today. It's like they say in sales or recruitment, it's champagne and razor blades. You know?
Champagne and razor blades.
Champagne one night, razor blades the next.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's this up and down based on external events. I think that is the thing that's grinding us all down so much.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's what comes to me when you share this approach, that it fundamentally shifts our perspective on our lives, our working lives, our family lives, so that ironically we can actually be more engaged, more intelligent about it, and enjoy it more, be more joyful about it, because it's not so serious.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like the way you be more joyful about it. Because joy, as we've spoken about, is a state. Is a state. Happiness comes and goes. Happiness is the emotion. Is the razor blades and champagne that you spoke about from a recruitment perspective. More often than not, and particularly during these times of change and of high inflation, where everyone wants to keep the job, because keeping that job, your family depends on it. It's what puts food on the table. It's what pays for your holiday. It's what it determines, quote unquote, as to whether you enjoy Christmas or not. Keeping that job becomes the be all and the end all. Now, if we operate from that space, KPIs are to be done and met at all costs. The space that you're coming from in meeting your KPI, when the interpretation happening at the back of the voice playing at the back of your head, at the back of your mind, linking with your emotional reality, linking with your mental reality, is that this job has to be kept at all costs. All of a sudden, your KPI is life and death. You walk on people to get that KPI done. And we've seen it. We've seen it. I often say about project management, talking about KPIs, this idea of project management comes to mind. I often talk about it, that actually meeting your deliverables in a project management capacity isn't just about meeting the deliverables. You can meet your deliverables, but if there's blood on the floor that you can look back and trace, you've met your deliverable, but how you met that deliverable is what's important. So I think from a KPI perspective, disidentifying with the utmost need to keep your job. The job is important. We recognize it's important. But if you're identified with that need, then you're just that little bit less of a human being at that particular instance, in that particular moment. But if we can step outside of the need to keep the job and bring a sense of openness and curiosity and a sense of being here with the job that I have and the desire to do the best that I can be at this moment, what you might find is two things. You either transcend that KPI and blow it out of the water without, as it were, trying so hard. If it happens that you don't meet the KPI, as you've mentioned, it's not the end of the world. And certainly the organization, it's not the end of the organization either. What we are talking about here is something that is quite countercultural, but it's something that is intensely human at the same time.
I'm going to bring in something that's even more countercultural and even more intensely human, which is if I'm to live in this way, where I just commit to being fully myself, fully present as the awareness that's aware of this moment. I do the best with what life is bringing me. I give up worrying about the future. Right? I give up putting my faith in the KPI. I give up putting my faith into this organization and me keeping my job, in the mortgage, in the house. If I take that away and say, do you know what? I'm just going to live in the flow of life and do my best. Where then am I to put my faith and my trust? How am I to know that if this organization crumbles or if I lose my job, that what's coming for me from the rest of my life is good, that may work in my favor? Right? And this question comes to the heart of, do we live in a kind universe or a universe that is malevolent, right? And so I would love to hear your thoughts on living in this way of surrender, in this way of being present with what's coming up and trusting, having faith in life to bring you what you need, including the challenges, in order to help you grow, but to cater for your physical needs, for your family's needs. How do you think about that transition from I'm the one doing it all and it's all up to me, to having faith in something greater, be that life or source or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah. Surrendering is not callous. Surrendering doesn't mean stupid. Surrendering means being really intelligent about how you go about with experience. Because that's what we're doing. We're living with experience. Ironically, for the person who might feel that being able to be in control is the way to go, controlling everything from the job that I have to the job that I want to get to the organization that I want to work for, to the amount of money I want to make. The person who wants to adopt that approach, when you question them and scratch a little bit below the surface, what you'll find is that there is a deep frustration happening pretty much at every moment. And I tell you where that frustration arises from. That frustration arises from the reality, whether they are aware of it or not, that in actual fact, as much as they want to be in control, they're not in control. Indeed, they can't be in control of everything. And indeed, the things that they think that they're in control of, they're not in control of it. Because life is like that. Life actually is about recognizing that you're not in control. Just like I am in no way, shape or form, Kian, in control of whether my next breath is going to happen or not. I've got no idea. I literally have no idea whether I'm going to be breathing the next 5 minutes. And the people that have been normal, like you and I, sat down having a beer or having a drink or having a chat with someone, and bang, they've had a heart attack and are gone. Countless examples of people who have done that. In fact, on my way coming here this morning, a good friend of mine sent me a text to say her mother just died. She had seen her mother about a few months prior. She had no idea that the mother was going to die. No idea. She was not in control of what happened. And all of a sudden, when something happens that is out of our control, what does it do? Actually makes us take a step back to reevaluate about what is really important. What's really important? And all of a sudden, we become more aware that being in control is not what's important. What is important, as you rightly put, is learning to surf. Learning to surf the waves of life. Now, I'm not a surfer. I know you might be a surfer, but there's a skill to surfing. Yeah. Getting on that surfboard mid-flow of the current and standing takes time. You fall off so many times. I've seen it. I think I once tried to learn to stand on a surfboard on dry land, on the beach, and I couldn't even get up on the beach, right? Talk less of learning to stand up on a surfboard on the water. For those that are surfers, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about more than I do. The key, the skill that we're talking about is learning to surf with the flow of life. That's the kind of control, quote unquote, that we want to be in, where we can stand on that surfboard regardless of what comes. Stress, pain, emotional turbulence, pressure, happiness, joy, success, accomplishment. Not always the negative stuff, even though there's no such thing as negative or positive. Really, all we have is experience. But being able to surf the waves regardless of the texture of experience. Whether you're a CEO or a senior leader, whether you have too many KPIs, a smaller KPI to meet, being able to surf and still to hit that KPI while surfing mid-flow, that's the skill. That's transformation. Being able to surf the waves, small waves, medium waves, or the very big waves when they come, because they do come, the big ones come. And you're shaking your head because you understand there's some really big waves that you look at those waves and you go, this is, I can't, this is going to be the end of me. I can't, there's no way I can surf that wave. Knowing, being curious will show you that actually you can. It's not really you doing it. Something greater than what I identify with. Something greater within me that I don't identify with, that's going to get me, that's going to get you over that wave.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image that of surfing the waves of life in faith, that whatever way this goes, number one, I can handle it because I am the presence, the awareness that's aware of all these waves. And two, to recognize that that presence, that awareness is the same one that's in me as is in you. You and I are having the same experience behind the thoughts, behind the emotions, that presence. And so in that sense, you and I are the same, and we're part of it. The two of us are one. And that goes for every other human being who's having an experience, is to realize that we are all one in that presence, in that awareness, and that the sum total of all that awareness, of all that consciousness, is playing us like an instrument in ways.
Yeah.
And the more that we relax into that and allow that to happen by working on the 3 areas that you spoke about, the more we can participate in the flow of life and stop resisting it, ironically then, the better our life starts to go. And if things that needed to die will die, and things that need to be born will be born. And it's like the beautiful moment of realizing after a while of doing self-mastery practices is that self that you were trying to master is actually part of a much bigger story. Whatever name you want to put on it, that's doing it all. So you can sit back and you go, wow, share price went up, share price went down, job lost, person passed away, person was born. Wow. Look at the perfection of it all.
Yeah. I'm still here.
I think that is one of the major antidotes to the crisis of meaning that we're having, the challenges we have with engagement in work, the stress we feel about our financial situation, and to really go through this path of learning and growing to come back to realizing that that presence is the only thing that's really important. And through what you've shared, to focus on that and to recognize that and to remind yourself of that every single day, no matter how difficult it is for the human, I think is a beautiful place to live your life from. You know, and may we all live from that place more consciously.
And can I just say something there? Because as you're speaking there, something else kept on coming to mind. And it's really important to say this, that we talk about faith, that surrender requires us to have faith. But it's not a emptyless faith. We're not discounting reason here. No, we're not discounting reason. Reason is important. It's a faith-inspired reason. Faith and reason working together. We have brains for a reason. Yeah? We are intellectual for a reason. But it's a bit like the computer. We know when to switch it off in order to switch it back on so that it functions even better. Awareness isn't just faith. Awareness is a sum total of everything that we are and more than we realize. Awareness. Awareness is not some fluffy hula blue state that exists separate from who Jude is. Awareness is a combination of my mental self, of my emotional self, of my spiritual self, of my soul, and my uniqueness. Awareness is all of that and more, which is why I often say to people when we talk about emotional intelligence, I say, emotional intelligence is only a door. Door. Your emotions, the emotion of anger, the emotion of happiness, of fulfillment. It's a door. And it's a door that once we learn to self-regulate, we realize actually self-regulation allows me to open up the door of that emotion. And you realize that when you open that door of emotion, that particular door of emotion, there's another space, a much bigger space. And just as you get to the end of that space, self-regulating, just when you think, I've achieved, I feel that I'm mastering that emotion, bang, there's another door to open. There's a much bigger space. It's a state of continuous growth and continuous actualizing. That's what leads to transformation, is actualizing the emotion, actualizing it, activating the emotion, and using that emotion as part of a self-regulatory, self-mastery practice that then opens up that door to a much bigger door. Well, one of the things that we were speaking about before we came were, what's happening in the workplace at the moment are things like AI. Yeah, everyone is talking about AI these days. AI has come to take my jobs, often hear people say. There's a fear, I notice. I don't know what your experience is. There's a fear around AI. AI is all over LinkedIn. And even in the conference that I went to where Dubai, there was a great emphasis on the impact of AI. What's AI going to bring? I remember one of the conversations that we had, there was a presenter that spoke about AI, and he spoke about AI bringing a sense of emptiness for those that really use AI to achieve particular things. Research shows that there's an internal emptiness because it's not really them doing it, as it were. They're relying on something other, as it were. It gives a sense of emptiness. And so when I hear people say things like, "Is AI is going to take my job? I'm afraid of AI." That points to a disconnection within, because there is an identification with AI such that we've lost sight of actually that which created AI in the first place. And so one of the things I speak about is let your emotional intelligence, guide how you use AI. Let EI guide AI. Let how you manage yourself, how you regulate yourself, how you connect with yourself, guide how you experience and use AI. It's a different texture. Operate in AI from a different space. AI is here to serve us because we created it. It did not emerge. A bit like the paperless office. Remember the paperless office when it came? When computers came.
That was before my time.
The paperless office, when computers came, people thought, we're not going to need libraries anymore. Libraries are going to become obsolete. In the office, in your workplace, you're not going to need books anymore or papers, or everything's going to go. And what happened? Always be kinesthetic. Those of us that are academic always like the smell of it. There's nothing. Open up an old, from Ireland, you go to those old libraries in the UK. Pull out a book. You're not reading it. Open it, and smell the book. You're smelling the ancient wisdom behind that book. That's never going to go away. The paperless office never went away. Actually, what's done is that we have now incorporated. What's the word I'm looking for? There's a word we have
assimilated
in our awareness. We've assimilated newness, and all of a sudden it's now part of who we are. AI is exactly the same. We're going to assimilate AI. AI will be assimilated into who we are as higher order beings, connected within and therefore connected without. Leading self within, and because we spend time connecting within through self-regulation, better able to co-regulate. That's going to be the journey of AI. Say to our people that are listening to this podcast, we are saying, don't be afraid of AI. Afraid of AI. Let's just say it one more time. Don't be afraid of AI. AI is here to work with us.
I love that vision, and also to recognize that the fear you feel about AI coming in to take your job, that from a transformational leadership perspective is a signal to look at it.
Yes.
It's a signal to really observe and go inward and look at, where is that fear coming from?
Yeah.
What old pattern is that fear playing off?
Yeah.
Maybe it's scarcity, maybe it's self-worth, maybe it's something of the ego that's trying to protect itself rather than really looking at to embrace what AI could potentially do.
Yes.
And so I think, using the tenets that you've shared today around transformational leadership, any challenge really is seen as kind of the furnace of transformation.
Yes.
It is really looking at challenges that happen, AI related, people related or not, family related, money related, all those things as something that is teaching me about myself, something that's helping me grow. Like a mantra that I love to use is, it comes to free me. It comes to free me. This situation, it comes to free me. This person saying that trigger comes to free me. Everything that happens for my highest good. The essence of what you shared is becoming transformational, is really recognizing that moment to moment, life is beautifully crafted to give us exactly the things that we need. Your partner is beautifully crafted to push the buttons that you've had and you've inherited from your parents. And when you start to see the perfection of the design, you can't help but laugh at it all.
I love that.
It is so funny.
I love that.
Because you see this when you look back on your life retrospectively. You go, wow, I lost that job and then I found this, and then I lost that love and then I found that. And it's like, let's start seeing it now.
Yeah.
Let's start recognizing that that's happening right now, this moment.
Yeah.
And dropping into the present moment with faith and with the understanding that no matter what it is, it comes to free me. I'm bigger than it.
Yeah.
And it's happening for my highest good.
Yeah.
Then you can live a life in joy.
Yeah. Live a life in joy. I love that. Yeah. And I love the way you phrase that part there about transformation and about AI. That transformation, certainly the way that we're speaking about it, is about recognizing that when you feel a certain way, whether that's painful or fearful of something, it's an opportunity. The pain is an opportunity to take a step back and to re-examine, what is this saying to me here right now? What is the lesson that I'm learning here in this sense of fear that I'm feeling right now? So you're not running away from the pain, which is what we do. We run away from it. We scarper from the pain. I always give the analogy, Kian, and it's a story that comes to mind. Oh yes, I give the story of a little village. I'm thinking of a village in Africa. Yes, all people are gathered around a fire, having a great time. Music, the drums are playing. The little kids eating food, and there's just such a wonderful atmosphere. And out of the blue, from nowhere, a lion appears, a big lion. And people get into a panic, run, jump over the fire and scarper. And guess who stays back and doesn't run away from the lion? Little 3-year-old child, not exposed to fear, just stands there looking at the lion out of curiosity. The lion growls at the little child, big growl. What does the child do? The child growls back at the lion. And when the lion sees the child growl back at him, guess what the lion does? It turns around and scarpers. Transformation is exactly the same way. That when we feel the fear, rather than do what we are programmed to do, that's the word, rather than act in there's a word I'm looking for, not robotic, the word will come back. Rather than act in a robotic way and run away, actually, we stand and become curious about the sensation of fear. What am I feeling right now? When I talk about AI, there's a sense that I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. What is that actually saying to me? Yeah? What's that saying to me? What is the meaning? What meaning am I making about that? Yeah. And what opportunity is arising here for some self-growth through some self-mastery practice? Yeah. So really, fear and the experience of pain and the experience of suffering, in whatever shape or form it comes, is an opportunity to step out of automation. That's what I was looking for. So automated. It's an opportunity to step out of automation and automatic responses, which in organizations, as leaders, we tend to do all the time.
A fantastic conversation. Conscious it's over 2 hours we have been here, and I would keep going. I'm getting tired.
Yes.
And attention is starting to wane. And I know
Yes.
you've been out and about on the speaking circuit. I know you're working many organizations in Sydney and also globally. You're coaching. Where can people reach you and hear more about, bring you more into their organization, or just if they're interested in reaching on a personal level?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm on LinkedIn, Jude Martin Etuka on LinkedIn, but also visit my website, www.jude-martin.com. It's a new website that I was speaking to you about, and it's constantly, it's recently been put up and developed. So visit me there, drop me an email, info@jude-martin.com.
Beautiful. It's been an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Been a pleasure. Thank you, Ken, for having me again.